do is have her come up here now and talk. I'm going to introduce Senator Tonya Schuitmaker. We're looking very forward to having her tell us how she's going to make things better in Michigan as an Attorney General. Okay, please welcome her up here for me.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate it, and thank you. And I just have a 3-hour drive home, and I had to be in Novi at 8 o'clock this morning. I live on the other side of the state, so I've been over to this side of the state twice now today. But thank you very much for coming out and hearing. I am Tonya Schuitmaker. I want to be your next Attorney General, and just to tell you about myself is I grew up on a family farm over near Kalamazoo. We picked asparagus, and for those of you that grew up on a farm you pick asparagus before and after school, you certainly learn the value of hard work, personal responsibility, and dedication really, I think, young. And so that's what my parents always believed in. I was the only child of Harold and Zoe, and I went on, and I live on that same family farm today. My husband and I bought the farmhouse from my parents, and they built a new house next door. And they still live next door, so it's been wonderful because my kids are 22 and 19 now, and so they grew up with their grandparents right next door, which is really nice. I went to Michigan State University, then went on to Detroit College of Law and practiced law for 10 years. And I grew up in a family that really believed in the constitutional values of our country was founded upon, that we all have the individual pursuit for opportunity, and it's up to us to make those freedom of choices in order to go on and fulfill our destiny. And I then, when my kids were about 8 and 5, back in 2004, destiny called me. I really believed that I wanted a Michigan that my kids could come back when they graduated and live and find a livelihood. And so that's really what prompted me to run for office. I grew up, and my dad was always toting me off to township meetings, so I guess I got the love of government in terms of good governance from my dad. And so I ran for office because I saw underneath Jennifer Granholm, we saw thousands of jobs, close to, I think, 1 million jobs leave this great state. And I wanted the same opportunities that were afforded to me to be to my children when they graduated. And so that's what prompted me to run for state rep. I spent 6 years in the House of Representatives, and then I will be completing my 8th and final year in the state Senate. I was elected as President Pro Tem of the Michigan Senate, only the second woman to ever be elected in that position. And I think I guess I'm most proudest of the year that I came back in 2010, because if you recall back in 2010, Michigan was having all sorts of problems. We had a structural imbalance in our budget. We needed to right-size that budget because just like every family out there, government has to live within its means. And we had a very uncompetitive Michigan business tax. We weren't a right-to-work state. And so I'm very proud of the accomplishments we made because we made Michigan a right-to-work state. We got rid of close to 2,000 regulations that were hampering businesses. We got rid of the jobs-killing Michigan business tax. We balanced our budget. We cut about $1.5 billion out of the state budget to right-size it so that we did make up for those 1 million jobs that left, and those people were no longer paying into the state coffers. And so, and then if you recall, the budget actually went up to the in fact, sometimes we had a clock in the House of Representatives when the Democrats controlled. The clock would then stop, and it wouldn't go any farther because on October 1st was when the new budget started, and Republicans and Democrats were unable to craft a budget, and so twice that clock just stopped and stood in time. And so we have never had that situation. We have had a budget done on time now. It will be for the 8th year in a row. And so that's quite an accomplishment when you say, what have Republicans done for you, the taxpayer in Lansing, is we've had a balanced budget not only on October 1st, but by June, usually about the middle of June, because most municipalities and school districts depend upon, they need to know how much they're getting from the state in order to plan their budget. So we've had it not only done on time, but also early. So there's been a lot to do. I am running for Attorney General. I feel very passionate about giving back and being a servant leader. And I think the Attorney General office, is the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Michigan. And so what does an Attorney General do? They do everything. They deal with environmental law. They deal with property law. They deal with criminal law, civil law. They deal with everything, child support. I heard from a woman, the great thing about running statewide is you hear what is working and what isn't working, and she had some choice words in terms of the child support system wasn't working for her. And so I pledge to you that I will take a top-to-bottom approach in terms of going to every department, finding out from the constituents what is working and what isn't working in the Attorney General's office. But they do deal with child support. So I think it's important to have an Attorney General that has had experience in all those different areas of law. And one of the great things about being in private practice for 10 years, in addition to the fact that I know what it's like to have to earn a paycheck, and I've signed both sides of the paycheck, not just been on the government dime my whole life. And so that's so important to have that perspective. And it's also important to have the perspective of an Attorney General that has dealt with all those different laws in our great state. And so I think I'm very qualified. I think there's three things that when you go to vote for an Attorney General that you should contemplate on. First, does that candidate represent your values and your principles? I can tell you I'm pro-life, I'm pro-Second Amendment. In fact, I had a school in Allegan County that are protesting the gun violence, and certainly nobody wants to see that happen in our society, but they asked me what I thought about them walking out during the school day. And I'm all for, if you want to protest, go right ahead. But in the school day, you know, really learn. That's what the day is about. And so I was a little disappointed in the adults who went out and allowed that to happen. And so the news media called me, and as news media does, they just took the first sentence. And my quote was something along the lines of, I'm greatly disappointed in the adults. This solves nothing. And instead take the word of one of the fathers whose child was killed in Florida and walk up, don't walk out. Walk up to the person that sits alone at the lunch table. Walk up to the teacher and say thank you. And show compassion amongst your fellow student, and in essence is what the quote was. Of course, the news media just says, I'm greatly disappointed, this solves nothing. And so then the students then started protesting me, and it's really amazing how we are on the verge, I think, of somewhat socialism versus freedom is on the other side. And because they said that they looked up my campaign video, found out I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, and so they wanted me to cease my membership with that terrorist organization is exactly what they said. They wanted me to, and I have had my CPL for 14 years as a woman. I want my protection. And then they wanted me to resign from office. It's unreal, their perspective. They want to protest on a Saturday, or even come out inside my office, have at it. I can tell you when I voted on right to work, and around that year of 2010, what I came into every day in work in representing Kalamazoo County was that they were picketing my office. If they weren't picketing me, they were picketing the congressman's office next to me. They brought me coal for Christmas. They brought me, they came to my house saying nasty Christmas carols to me about how I was a Grinch. But, I believed in what we did. I believed in the decisions that needed to be made to right-size the state of Michigan. And as your Attorney General, I want to put forth that same determination in terms of making government work and not be an activist Attorney General, but be a rule of law Attorney General. So do I represent your values and your principles? I can tell you probably I do represent everyone in here's values and principles. Second of all, I think it's important to have a candidate that has a proven record. I have not only worked and done issues, but I've also worked on issues that affect everyone in society, such as dealing with the huge opioid and drug epidemic that we have in the state that are destroying communities and destroying families. This morning I spoke to a group of 250 people, and about a quarter of them raised their hand when I said, do you know somebody who has a drug problem, and or know somebody that has been affected? And that's really sad. It's really affecting a lot of families, and so we need to do something to curb that. A bill that I introduced dealt with the Michigan automated prescription system, which is already existing system, but it makes every doctor check before they go dispense a patient's prescription history. This will cut down on pill mills and doctor shopping. Also, I've dealt with bills that have clamped down on the super drunk laws or problems that we were having in terms of people gaming the vehicle ignition system and having their kid in the back seat blow into it, or in one case, I don't know if I really believe it, but there was a news story that they had a raccoon and they killed the raccoon by having them breathe into the vehicle ignition system. But I don't make this stuff up. But anyway, so I think I have a great proven record in terms of life-changing issues that affect all of us and to run on in a general election. And then the third thing is, the third reason you should consider me as your Attorney General candidate is to make sure that we have somebody who can win in the general election. And I've won in counties that have voted for Barack Obama not once but twice. And so I can tell you I can take a conservative message and explain it to the independent voters that are the swing in the election to help them understand why voting conservative and voting for freedom makes a difference in their lives. So those are the three reasons, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I thank you so much for your time. And I will say that thank you to the Tea Party, because you helped, even though you're not over here, the Kalamazoo Tea Party Patriots. I'm endorsed by Jean Clem, and if any of you know Jean, but they helped get me elected in 2010, and so I'm forever grateful for the work that you guys have done to energize the Republican Party. I've been a lifelong Republican, and so thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do. And happy to answer any questions.
Okay, does anybody have a question? Okay, right here.
As Attorney General, what is your opinion on the Enbridge pipeline under the Straits of Mackinac?
So the Enbridge pipeline, first of all, we certainly want to make sure that our precious resources are stable. The company did shut it down this week because they found some dents in the pipe. Nobody wants to see a catastrophe happen, so we want to make sure that it's the safest. Right now, it is the federal government actually regulates it, and so being a rule of law attorney general, I think it's up for the governor and the legislature to determine there's a lease with Enbridge to determine that. And so unless there's a violation of the lease and the legislature wants to take action, I would not be in favor of, an activist attorney general. I think there's, as putting on my lawmaker hat, you need to make sure that there's proper heating resources. The UP depends upon the propane that comes off that. But, we also want to make sure that we protect the environment. Having grown up on a farm, I want to make sure, I have always felt like I'm a good steward of the land, and so we want to make sure that we practice good stewardship, and that's protecting our Great Lakes.
Any other question? Okay, hang on.
Randy.
Can you kind of tell us what the Attorney General's office can do about sanctuary cities, and if there's anything that you would look at as sanctuary cities?
Well, certainly as a lawmaker, I've partnered with Senator Colbeck to do two things with sanctuary cities: call upon the federal government to withhold funding from these lawless sanctuary cities, and then also to call upon the federal government to pass Kate's Law, which will harshen the penalties if any criminals come and they get caught again. And because certainly what happened in Kate Steinley's case out in California is just horrific. And so I don't accept that as a rule of law attorney general. I think we need to make sure that we clamp down on the lawlessness of this. And so as attorney general, though, to be more specific, there's a case I think emanating out of Arizona, which if you guys can recall, with regards to the law enforcement stopping and asking somebody's citizenship. That's on appeal right now. And so in order to, a lot of people ask me about can you bring criminal charges against somebody for not following the federal immigration law. Unless there's concurrent jurisdiction, which sometimes there is on federal law, and we're dealing with federal immigration law. So what I can do as a state attorney general is to work in conjunction with the U.S. attorney on federal immigration law and see about getting concurrent jurisdiction. In terms of actually prosecuting them right now, I think we have to wait until that case works its way up through the court system and probably is ultimately heard in the Supreme Court. But it is federal law, so there's somewhat of a hand, unless the legislature passes a law. Right now, Michigan has no law on that, I think, because we're waiting on the other case down in, I think, Arizona or Texas.
Okay, here's another.
First of all, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We look forward to you speaking and telling us all about what your plans are. I notice that you have lots of endorsements from lots of sheriff departments and police departments and all of that stuff. So I assume you're familiar with what they do and how they do things. Is there anything that we should be giving our officers or our police departments that they don't have now that would help them do this job a little better, in your opinion?
Well, I think you need to ask law enforcement that question. I have great admiration for those that have served our country, whether it's in the armed forces or in law enforcement. They risk their lives every day. You know, we try to give them bulletproof vests and the funding necessary to do that. I did speak to the law enforcement community this morning. I should have asked them. I'm speaking to another group on Friday, so I'll ask them. I don't know offhand. I'm so sorry.
Any more questions?
I'm Randy St. Laurent. I'm the former district chairman for this area, and I just want to make sure that you know how Tonya or anybody else running for Attorney General and, quite frankly, Secretary of State gets on the ballot. They are put on the ballot at the Republican State Convention by precinct delegates. The Democrats do the same thing. If you recall, you probably never voted to put a Attorney General or a Secretary of State, some of these people running for the college offices on the ballot for in a primary. You don't do that. The political parties do that. So if you indeed feel that this lady is your choice for Attorney General, or somebody else is your choice for any of these offices, what you need to do is either, one, become a precinct delegate and try and go to a state convention where you cast that vote, or talk to the precinct delegates in your area and tell them how you want that vote cast. When you vote for a precinct delegate, quite frankly, you're voting for somebody to represent your interests as a Republican or a Democrat. And that's what they're supposed to do, besides going to all the great parties precinct delegates go to. I think they go to 2 every 2 years, just being facetious. But that's what these people are for. So if you're not a precinct delegate, and you're not interested in getting involved in that, find out who your precinct delegate is. You can find out from the clerk. And you might tell them, if this lady's your choice, that you would really appreciate their consideration of that in the convention, or sending delegates that will elect her to the convention, or some other candidate. So just please be aware, that's how she and others like her are going to get on the ballot.
Thank you, Randy. The state convention is August 25th. You have to file for a precinct delegate by May 8th. And then those precinct delegates are elected at the August 7th primary. And then a week later, if you're elected as a precinct delegate, you get called for county convention. And at the county convention is where they decide who's going to go to state convention. So it is very important. It's going to be a hotly contested year. You have not only Attorney General, which is the position I'm running for, but you have Secretary of State. You have all the state boards, so the U of M, Wayne State, and Michigan State boards. You also have the Lieutenant Governor, and then also the boards of education. So just about everything is up that could be up at the state convention. So it's a hot ticket in town.
Okay, any more questions?
Yes, again, it's a pleasure to have you here. I've known Gene since 2009, been right through the whole thing. I heard all about everything that was going on, so I was very glad that you could make it out. We did have, a few months back, we had your competitor out. And one thing that I was curious about, with the time we were talking, this is, I have actually two questions. First one being on the Michigan Catastrophic Fund. Where your feelings are on that, because again, it just took an increase again. You know, we talked to Representative Lucido and a few others. You know, you got an excess of a $20 billion fund. Nobody's willing to look at it. When you talk to somebody, well, they say, well, the legislature can't do anything. The legislature set it up, so you know, and so I'm just looking at it. We keep putting money into this pot, and the most that's ever been drawn out is $900 million in 1 year. It's never ever gone above that, but we keep putting more in there. And it just seems that that's kind of a cash cow. I'm not sure exactly why we're not doing something, or at least looking at some options, you know, on that. And the second question being, as Attorney General, given the situation that we had in Flint with the whole water deal, that's been a predominant issue, especially in this area. My son graduated from U of M, so over in Flint there, and he was going to school at the time, so he was kind of, you know, aware of everything that was going on. I'm wondering what, and it's not to second guess Attorney General Schuitmaker, but what would you have done, or what do you think in a similar type situation, what do you think are the resources that you could bring to kind of help take care of a situation like that, or prevent it altogether? All
right, so your first question was dealing with the Catastrophic Claims Fund. And what I can tell you is the Senate passed out a package which helped. It still kept the unlimited benefits, and this was, I think, 3 years ago. So there were enough votes in the Senate to pass it out. The problem is getting the votes in the House, and that's where you need a good leader to assemble the votes. And I think there's a very fair and reasonable compromise there if somebody puts the time and effort into that in the House. The votes are there in the Senate, and what we did for the Catastrophic Claims Fund is, because you're right, it's a statutory created entity and it's not transparent. One of the reasons for that is because the insurance industry, each insurance industry has proprietary information that they want protected, and so that's why it is that way. That's to be said that as ratepayers that pay into it, that's not fair, that's not right, that kind of goes against everything we believe in. And so what the Senate bill did is it set up actually a transparent entity. So it closed out kind of the catastrophic claims, and it created a entity that was subject to FOIA and everything like that. It also helped deal with the fraud authority. It helped deal with attendant care, in terms of kind of trying to cap those attendant care costs. And if you did those 3 or 4 things, I believe, and I voted in favor of it, that you can help reduce auto insurance rate and also create a more transparent entity. So that's I think everyone in the Senate is the same as what was there before, so there are the votes in the Senate to do that. We did that 3 years ago, and there was a deal almost to get it done in lame duck. You had all the different interested parties there to almost come to an agreement, and unfortunately it failed, and they were the speaker was gonna deal with it this year, and you know, I would say he hasn't led on that because it's still not dealt with, and I do think that there is a compromise. I think take what we did and, you know, tweak it a little bit one way or another, and you can get something done. Your second question is with Flint, And I will say that that's a hard one because, first of all, as if I'm elected Attorney General, I might be having to take those cases over, and I don't want to prejudge anything. So my official comment has always been it would not be fair to anyone involved if I were to prejudge a case, because I by no means have gone through all the pleadings and sat through all the court. I can tell you as Attorney General, I pledge that I will dig deep, do a deep dive into it in terms of making sure that fairness and justice is carried out.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, one more quick one. Last question.
As Attorney General, what would your feelings be about enforcement of civil asset forfeiture? What role would you play, or how would you improve or rein that in? Or
Well, actually, that's more of a legislative thing. I can answer it as a legislator. Actually, I don't think the Attorney General really would get much involved in it except to enforce the law as passed by the legislature. Last year, we did do a bill to raise the standard up to clear and convincing. And I by no means am in favor of the government coming in and taking people's property. And I think what we did last year was a good first step. I think we should give it time to see how that works, because we did raise the standard to clear and convincing. We made it subject to judicial review. Part of the problem on the other side, and I'm a strict constructionist and believe that that people's property should be sacred and not be taken, is that you have these drug runners that run huge shipments of drugs, and they separate the drugs from the cash. So I don't know if anyone watched the testimony that was done in the House Judiciary Committee. Did anyone see that? What essence, you know, they had the underbody of a car, and they had cash, millions of dollars in cash, in one of these drug busts. Certainly, I don't think anyone in here believes in drug money and that should be legal. And so it was evident. And so I think that there's maybe a little bit more room you can do in order to protect the citizen, but you also don't want to go too far where you're allowing criminal enterprises and drug runners to go throughout the state. I live on 94. They're having amazing amounts of drugs being shipped from Chicago to Detroit, and drug busts happen all the time. So I'm not for drug busts, or I'm not for drug running. So I think there's got to be, I hear the horror stories on the other side, a good compromise to be fixed so that you can accomplish both goals.
Okay. Thank you very much. So give me a hand, please. We're sorry you have to leave, but you have a safe trip back. Thank you.